So we can get you started. I hope everyone's back from their bio break and coffee break. We're gonna move to our next speaker, Ken Elliott. Ken works part-time as an associate forester with FSmith Consulting and as a silvicultural instructor with the Provincial Tree Marker Training Program. Ken's 40-year career has spanned many aspects of forestry, but his passion centers around evaluating and improving silvicultural approaches, transferred knowledge, and working with practitioners. So you can take it away there, Ken.
Okay. Thanks, Kaylin, and thanks, Victoria, for setting us up well for the rest of the morning here. My task is to talk to you folks about hemlock silviculture and the silviculture options that we have for hemlock woolly adelgid. Victoria was able to kind of introduce those. We're going to get into some of the details in this presentation. But first, I just wanted to sort of welcome you all to what we're calling the community of practice around hemlock, and that just to say that the work we've been doing the past few years is, it's a collective process where expertise is kind of spread. And I think with hemlock, there's definitely some people that have been doing work with it over the years that probably have a lot more experience than myself and many others that we hope will come along and continue to give us some help here. But the point is that we're all kind of moving ahead in real time and learning these things. The insect is coming, the expertise is coming, but we all need to kind of get together. So as Victoria mentioned, some of this started with groups like the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid working group and folks back before I wrapped up my career with M&R. I was working with Victoria and a couple of scientists from M&R, Bill Parker and Sharon Reed, and Victoria's colleague at the Forestry Service there, Chris McQuarrie. And she mentioned that we spent some time. We were kind of asked to wrestle down the science. What's going on with both hemlock, the management of hemlock, how hemlock responds to silviculture, and the science around the Adelgid, what was known about it, what it does to the trees, and that's why that paper came out in the Chronicle a few years ago, and the guidelines and the work that Victoria and others are doing right now to keep that guide up on the web is intended to keep putting in information as we learn it so that it's available to everyone. So, the expertise, like I say, is kind of spread and it's building now as more people start to focus on it. So, the foresters and others that have been working on this are really important to us moving forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Invasive Species Center and the Invasive Species Action Fund that's supporting some of this work, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that's, keeping track of where the insect is and putting in place the type of regulations that are needed to protect these forests. So that's the introduction. Let's go right on to the hemlock itself, and thinking about hemlock and where it fits in the ecology of Ontario. There's a map that's designed to show you where the current range is, and it's it's kind of a heat map idea. So where the reddest colors are where the density of hemlock is the greatest, and the lighter colors it's lower in those areas. So typically, across the south in particular, it tends to be found in pockets and in individual trees and stands, but also little patches of it. And it's kind of spread out. You don't see big stands of it in the south. That's more in central Ontario. So it's not as common as some of our other species. It kind of resides in some unique habitats. You think of these cool, shady habitats. So, in the summer, if you're out and it's really hot and you see a hemlock stand and you walk into that, you can notice right away an immediate change in the cooling of the air. It's responsible for creating some of those conditions where it grows. And like white pine, it probably exists in numbers that are quite a bit lower from what it would have been before the exploitation phase. That time period when a lot of the pine and hemlock were removed from some of these stands. It put the species into a situation where there was low seed availability, and it has a fairly exacting regeneration needs, and it hasn't been able to regrow back to the population numbers that it would have had. Currently, in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence forest, about 1% of that forest is comprised of more pure hemlock stands. So when we think of it on the wood products side, it's certainly possible to use it and has been used for construction lumber and pulp and paper and some of the typical things. Also unique products like pallets and boxes and crates and things like that. And it was also known as being quite valuable at the time, mid last century, for using the bark was used to tan leather. They extracted the material from the bark and they could use that to tan leather. So that's kind of its history. But currently, it's not that valuable as a wood product. And this is partly due to the fact that a percentage of the trees have what they call ring shake, which degrades the quality. So here's another picture of the range of hemlock in Ontario. This was created through work from the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid Forest Managers Working Group. That's an organization that started actually, they had their first meeting March 5th, 2014, and there were 9 members. And those folks have been meeting about twice a year since then. The list is now up to 118, and others are welcome. Kathleen Ryan, who was with Silviculture at the time, has been leading that group all through those 12 years. And they've as Victoria mentioned, they provide a lot of direction. And this is just a group of practitioners, just a group of people that it's not a government organization. It's just a loose organization of people that have been concerned about hemlock and the Adelgid coming along, right? So they have encouraged a lot of the work that you see now from thinking ahead. So it's the beginnings of this community practice can go back as far as then. But let's just talk a little more about hemlock. It is probably one of our most important wildlife trees. It's part of some of these important winter deer yards, and there's some conifers, or sorry, some birds that really only like to be in stands that have hemlock in them. And they're often associated with wetlands and riparian areas where the hemlock and cedar and some of the other conifers are responsible for keeping the streams cool. Um, it's an important component of some of our old growth forest ecosystems. And many of you know that people that are outdoor recreationalists, a lot of them have a real love for hemlock and consider it part of the landscapes that they like to visit as canoeists or hikers and people like that. As well, uh, hemlock's been a significant cultural, medicinal, and of practical importance to the indigenous peoples of Ontario, including the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. So it's a well-loved tree that it informs an important component of our forest and has often been retained and managed for some of these other values. And when I think of it from the tree marking perspective, over the years, many of us, when we would run into a hemlock or a little patch of hemlock in say the hardwood stands that we're doing work in, we'd often, revere that hemlock and have a smile, but we would usually just walk by those areas and, feel at that time that we were doing the right thing for it because we're protecting it, we're keeping it. And I think what we're learning now is that possibly some thinning, some help for that hemlock might be needed in today's situation. So let's talk a little bit about the ecology. So you can read through some of these. I'm gonna just point out a few of the important highlights here. Uh, one of the things is that it probably is our most shade tolerant tree in Ontario. It can survive with 5% light, which is remarkable. And not only can it survive at that 5%, but it can reside there for many years and still respond to release. So it's an amazing species that way. It's pretty flexible on the sites that it can grow on. However, it is susceptible to droughts. It will have a negative response to prolonged droughts. Um, and as I mentioned before, there's these cool, moist, north-facing slopes and sites that have a consistent supply of moisture are where it tends to do the best. Another sort of trivia type of piece there at the top on the right, it can actually photosynthesize at temperatures below freezing, as low as -5, and actually takes up 10% of its carbon during the dormant season. And so many of you'll know that it's often found mixed with other conifers, white pine and cedar, or with hardwoods, yellow birch, beech, red oak, red and sugar maple. So it's quite versatile. We see it in even stands, even age stands. We see it in multi-age stands, and we see it in uneven age stands. So it kind of covers the range there, and it will respond to single and small multi-tree gaps. You'll see regeneration come into those spots. And then in the bottom there, probably the most important sort of piece that we glean from the literature and talking to folks that have done management in their hemlock stands is that there is a slight weakness around heavy cutting. So if we cut these hemlock stands too heavily, there's a chance and there's a good possibility that you'll see decline, mortality, and wind throw. So it tends to set them back. So a little bit of thinning is good. Too open and you'll see them potentially get set back by that. So it's important to make sure that our silviculture is keeping things at the right level for the amount of thinning. So let's just get into the real main pieces around silviculture. This is from our silviculture guides, our Ontario guides, and we've checked the other ones, and it's all pretty similar. The first thing to make note of for regeneration is that piece in the bottom corner there about deer and moose being in these stands. If you are in a deer yard or in an area where there are a lot of moose or deer, you're going to have a hard time with regeneration. Both those species of ungulates seem to really like eating the regen, and it can be hard to get it going in those areas where there's a lot of the ungulates there. As far as the silviculture goes, um, it's possible to manage it under even-aged and uneven-aged systems. In the case of the uneven-aged, single tree and group selection will work. You don't need huge openings. A gap with a diameter of about 1 times the canopy height will work. It can even be as small as half the canopy height, and you'll still get regeneration. And again, you'll see these higher numbers. It tends to grow at higher densities than some of our other species. So we're looking at not reducing the BA more than a quarter or a third and keeping the BAs up above 24 in a lot of these stands when we're doing thinnings with uneven age management. With the even age systems, shelter wood can be used. Again, residual canopy closures between 70 and 80%. If you are looking at younger stands, a crop tree release approach will work. Um, in those cases, we're going to focus, like in the uneven age, we're going to focus on the dominant and codominant trees to keep, leaving 2 to 3-sided release on those. and we're going to target for removal trees that have less than 50% live crown ratio, and probably go to about 250 trees per hectare for a crop tree. So these next three slides, just a reminder of what Victoria was talking to us about. It's kind of a little bit of a horror movie as far as uh, if you're a hemlock tree and you knew about this insect that was coming, it would scare you. And I mean the numbers are bad. Like it's as Victoria was saying, it's asexual. It it produces a ridiculous number of eggs, and there's a ridiculous number of individuals in each egg, such that in even if your winter kill is 90%, that 10% is enough to keep the population there. So, there's a bunch of issues around um, just how effective this insect is at keeping itself going. And then I guess the one that maybe Victoria mentioned and is of some concern is the fact that the one crawler stage is matched up, so April, May, with spring migration for birds, and those birds are coming through the U.S. eastern seaboard where the Adelgid is still doing its damage, and there's potential for them to reside on those perching birds. And when they stop again, will some of them get off the bird and infect some of those stands? So I don't know all the mechanisms around how that happens, but it is a bit of a concern. Um, as far as there's a microscopic view of the intelligent on the left, and a picture of the those woolly ovisacs on the stem on the right here. And as Victoria mentioned, it's an insect that basically it's residing on the bottom of those branches and needles, and it's puts that stylet into the tree and basically sucks out the carbohydrates and nutrients while it's there. And the more and more that there is on a tree, the more harmful it is to the tree. And when Bill Parker looked into, how is this how is this affecting the trees? How do they how does this happen? How do they die? Sort of thing. It's sort of three steps. There's a physiological sort of dysfunction and then decline in mortality. So the first thing that happens is we're discussing is that the insects pulling nutrients and carbohydrates out of the tree, and that basically causes the tree to lose vigor. But it also stimulates the second phase, which is that there's a Bill refers to as a hypersensitive response. So the tree almost overreacts, like it's trying to get the insect off it, it's trying to kill it, and it does a lot of these things. Buds die, shoots die, needles die, the crown begins to decline, and eventually, over a 4 to 15 year period, 90% of the trees will die in these stands. And so it's sorry about that. It's a little bit of a scare, but yeah, I think everyone's kind of heard these stories, and that's why we're all kind of on board with trying to do what we can. I guess the good part about that 90% is that means that 10% of the trees have potential to be resistant in some way. And that's sort of reassuring on the future for hemlock, breeding programs, even just keeping hemlock on the landscape, that the resilient ones are going to be the ones that stay, and they're going to be the ones that breed with each other. So presumably over time, resistance can potentially build up. So now you've heard the horror story. There is hope, and the hope is in uh, these, sort of four-pronged, approach to dealing with it. This is what we're looking at in Ontario. We think that the two in the middle are the ones that we can do the most with right now. And our project that we've been working on really targets working on building expertise around silviculture and insecticides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these things. The next slide is just about what it is in the biology of these of the hemlock and the adelgid that gives us some more hope and the feeling that, if you look at hemlock, they do better when they're thinned, and they that maintains growth just like a lot of our trees, and maintaining a good stand density for hemlock will help them continue to be productive and more resilient. Um, Live crown ratios greater than 50% are where we see trees that have the best chance to respond. So we're going to talk more about live crown ratio in a bit, but those are the trees that have the best potential. If you leave trees that have more than 50% uh, live crown, they'll grow and they will respond to that thinning. On the Adelgid side, it's interesting. They would prefer that insect would prefer to be in the shade. They would like to be in places that have less than 30% sunlight. So bright sun, not where they really want to be. So the coincidence of those two things is that by maybe if we did some thinning, if we opened our canopies a bit, provide some more light, the trees are going to grow better, and presumably the adelgid's not going to do as well. So that's sort of the premise for the silviculture thinking. Victoria presented a version of this table that we worked on. I'm not going to go through too much detail on it. It's designed to help people depending on where they are. So across the top is the amount of adelgid that's in your area and some recommendations around what to do. Our work is all focused on this situation where there's no adelgid in your stand, and it's not right next door. It's a little ways away. And in those situations, we're trying to increase the resilience of those stands by doing some density regulation. And the focus is on getting rid of trees that have low live crown ratios, so less than 30%. And as far as other species go, we have to be careful there in trying to we don't want to remove all the other species because we don't know what's going to happen with the adelgid. So it's a balancing act there. We're going to try to keep a lot of the other species there, except for those that are, really shading out some of the hemlock. And then in the understory, we want to protect the hemlock and other evergreen regeneration. And as Victoria mentioned, we're trying to avoid in these early stages removing trees that are healthy uh, and have decent crowns on them before we see whether they are resistant to the Adelgid. So they may get some damage, but some of them have mechanisms that make them able to hold it off. So we don't want to take those trees away. The genetics from them could be super important over the long term. And then I think that's about all to say about that table. You can refer to that another time. So what have we been doing? What have we been doing around training? So the regional forest health networks really stepped up in this game, and as Dan was mentioning, a couple years ago, so back in 24, uh, they came to me, Jim McCready and Dan. They said, "Well, we know about this stuff you guys have been promoting around doing silviculture for hemlock." Woolly Adelgid. We would like to get we'd like to get the practitioners out in the field and get them to kind of learn what can be done. So how about we try running some workshops? So basically that was the beginning of that. They contacted me around this time in 24, and by April we had something put together, and we did. We ran our first workshop. We had 26 participants and six leaders involved, and we had people from First Nations, municipalities, CAs, SFLs, and MNR all come. And we basically designed this course using the model, the adult learning model that the provincial tree marking program uses. I've been involved with that for many years. And basically, the idea was give them the talks in the morning. Uh, Victoria's talk that you just heard, her 2024 version, which is was great, and it's even been improved now, as you saw. That's we had that. Then this discussion about silviculture was the next part. And then after the morning session inside, we went in the field in the afternoon. You can see a picture there on the right. Those are our, we set up a set of prism plots. That's what we decided would work best this time around. We broke everybody into small groups and they went out and looked at all the hemlock in their prism plot. Each tree. What's its condition? How healthy is it? What's the live crown ratio? We actually did the measurements on that. We checked to see what the crown closure was in the plot, and then we used flagging tape and did some practice marking. And again, we're all learning from each other. We got together at the end and had a discussion how everybody thought it went, and that was their first shot at that. So then the next year, last year, they Dan and Jim said, I don't think everybody in our area got a chance to be trained. So could we do it again? So again, we went out to this site in Orleans, and I really have to remember to mention that the city of Ottawa was an amazing partner with this. Jason Pollard and Dan Baker and a bunch of the other staff there. The first year and the second year, this is one of their properties. They came together and helped us immensely with this, and have been super good partners on getting this information out and providing a facility for people to go and do the indoor part, and being available on site. So again, this last year we did the same thing. We had 23 people this time and 9 instructors. Uh, Actually, I think Victoria was off on maternity leave, so colleague at the Invasive Species Center, Mackenzie DeGaspero, gave that presentation. I did the silviculture discussion, and then we went in the field in the afternoon and did the same basic thing with this group. Although we had another component, we added a discussion about using uh, basal bark application. Fraser Smith led that discussion about what he'd learned and what was being proposed around using um, Zytec and Starkle in particular. And he's going to talk more about that in the next talk. But we wanted people to be introduced to the equipment and the methodologies, and that's where we're moving so that the discussion is about both, right? So this is the basic prescription that we've been discussing at these sessions, and for you to see now. Um, Again, it's a pretty simple prescription. It's really about increasing the resilience of this hemlock and degrading the habitat for the Adelgid, right? So we're trying to get more light on the crowns. Um, we're going to remove the suppressed trees or the those in poor health, and those with small crowns, basically less than 30%. The trees that we're going to keep are the dominants and codominants, and we want to improve their growth by getting some more light on their crowns. And I'm literally purposely using that language. You're not trying to release the whole crown, you're trying to release some of it. And the fact that hemlock's so shade tolerant, it doesn't need a lot of extra light for it to start to respond. So it's that subtle. Other species, again, we're retaining most of the diversity. We'll, on a case-by-case basis, we'll remove, a big soft maple that's overtopping a hemlock, or, some sort of other species that would be more valuable to have the hemlock release. So you got to keep this objectives in mind for the hemlock, and and not be too hard on the other species, and make sure the diversity is still there. So again, 70% crown closure is the target. We're using a few other tools to help backstop that. So a third of the BA is all we want to remove. If a third falls below 24, we want to kind of stop at 24 for the BA in these stands. And if your stand is in or near where there already is Hemlock woolly Adelgid, the harvest should happen between August and February when they're not active, right? So that we're not moving them around. But again, if you're actually in an infested area, you'd have to get approval from CFIA. So there's some process there involved with that. These are a couple of the cheat sheets. I'm going to go through a few of the pieces we put together for the students for these workshops so you can see them. This one's around the health of hemlock and quality indicators. So on the left, we've kind of listed all the things that um, it's not different than any other tree. They all have their own health problems, if you want to call them. I mean, it's definitely susceptible to drought and windstorms. There's this looper that periodically comes and does some damage to hemlock. Spongy moth, spruce bollworm can harm it as well. There's a few wildlife species. There's a borer, the ring shake. So this ring shake, it's really hard to tell by looking at a tree from the outside. It's not easy to be able to observe it. And it's commonly caused by abrupt changes in growth. So maybe some of those stands that get really open, this also causes this problem too. And we already talked about deer browse, and there's 4 or 5 other things that can cause health issues for it. As we move over to the right, we're trying to help people identify uh, what would make a tree UGS, a hemlock tree. And so, the first one I'm going to go to is this live crown ratio. If it has less than 30% live crown, it cannot respond. So that's a UGS tree. Um, as far as crown health goes, so if it has a dead top, dieback in the upper crown, or more than 50% needle loss, we call that a poor tree, and that would be UGS. If it has none of those, it's a good tree, and it's AGS. If it has one or a little bit of a few of these, but not very much, then it's still an AGS tree. So that's sort of how we're qualifying it based on crown health. But there's also cankers, fruiting bodies, stem wounds that are not healing close to the ground, and a few other things like this that you would use to qualify it as a UGS tree. So this idea of estimating live crown ratio, this is the diagram that we use. Sorry, this is in feet, but basically the tree in the middle here, uh, it's a 50-foot tree. 15 feet of that, this very top part is live crown. It's what's green. And and that means that's the ratio that you use down here to calculate its percentage. So this tree would be a 30% live crown ratio. It's the one that's on the line and is not going to be able to respond to thinning. Sometimes you'll see a few leaves on a few of these lower branches. If they're not a bulky, proper branch with lots of leaf there, then we're not bringing the live crown down into these areas where there's a few small needles. So that's sort of the parameter for that. The other two trees in the diagram, the one on the left, it's got needles from top to bottom, so that's 100% live crown ratio. The one on the right, I used a ruler. It had 10 centimeters of live crown, and it's a 12.5 centimeter tree on the diagram. So that's a tree with 80% live crown. So this is one of the things that we're trying to get people trained on is this live crown ratio. Another one, somewhat challenging for us in forestry and in monitoring forests is to determine how much crown closure there is in your plot or your stand that you're working in. And it's a tricky concept to get your head around. You can't use a tool like a prism to calculate it. There are some uh, there are a few tools out there that you can use to help you. There's this densitometer tool. You can use canopy photos, but I think the best way with a group is to use a group consensus approach. And the way we've kind of taught people is, if you're looking at this 70%, basically what you're trying to do is pretend you're looking from the air to the ground. The white blotches are where the sun is actually hitting the ground. The black is the crown. So you're trying to calculate that by walking around your plot, walking around your area, having a look, come back to the group. Everybody gives their numbers. If they're not the same, then you have a discussion about how they differ, and you work through trying to figure out what makes sense for that stand or that plot. One of the complicating factors is that this is live. This is when all the leaves are on. That's when it's calculated. So if you happen to be out there in the winter or when the leaves are off the deciduous trees, you have to imagine those leaves being on, and that can be hard. As well, the layering of the canopies or the crowns in these types of stands can make it hard to see as well. So it's something to be worked on. Um, the tree marking steps, we've kind of got this down now where we think the best approach in these stands is is I know it's a lot of paint, but we're talking about using blue to pick out their dominant and codominant hemlock crop trees, the trees that'll be staying. There'll also be the trees that'll be the target for insecticide treatment. So start with the blue, then provide some release by marking out the suppressed per quality trees that are impacting on those dominant and codominants, leaving 70% live crown. And Fraser's going to get into all the detail about the insecticide, but suffice to say that we're going to start with the blue trees, and we'll probably be adding some more trees when we come through to do the insecticide treatments. And there's a cumulative diameter calculation that will get done, and I'm going to leave that for Fraser. Um, this is pretty much what it looks like. This is from LaRose. Uh, we marked we did exactly what I said in the previous slide there. The dominant codominant trees have blue paint on them, and then we released those trees by marking some of the ones um, that were near them. And there's trees that don't have any paint on them, and those may actually get treated as well with the insecticide. So last year, around this time, it was January, I believe, we put in an application. The Regional Forest Health Network put in an application for the to the Invasive Species Action Fund to get funding to do something a little more comprehensive. So this was approved. We got our funding in August, and the project was set up. And what we're trying to do is have a group of sites that people can learn from. And the idea for a site is that there'll be an operational trial, so a place where it's thinned, and a place where it's thinned and the insecticides have been applied, and some control areas where one example would be that it's been marked, and we can use insecticide there, and that's a demonstration of the marking, and then we'll have an area that hasn't been treated and can be used for the practice training of the practitioners. So this is basically our goal. We want managers to be actively managing, protecting their hemlock stands with the most current knowledge. And we think this project's going to be successful if these things happen. We get the site set up, we get courses delivered, we get some operational and potentially real research done on them, and that the practitioners go home and use these kind of techniques in their own forests, and that ultimately we have more resilient forests. So right now we're at the stage where we've actually got three sites picked out: LaRose Forest, Northumberland County, and Simcoe County. They've all come on as partners to to put in a site. They're at different stages. We're working with the SFLs on the Crown to pick a site for Central Ontario. It's the next step to get one up there as well. This is the kind of thing we were looking for, 8 to 10 hectares, uh, and willingness to take on all these activities. So this is basically what the LaRose site looks like. They're probably the first along right now. Steve Hunter, Katya, and Meg Quigley on the right from FSmith Consulting. The other two are from LaRose. You can kind of see the way it's laid out. They're not all going to be identical in terms of the configuration, but we want them each to have these different treatments. So cut an insecticide, oh, sorry. Um, Cut without insecticide, and then up here, the practice areas are going to have an area that's demonstration, it's been marked, and then the tree marking area for practicing. So this is the idea that we wanted to be you folks to be ready for. So in the next few years, we're going to have these sites available for people to go out and do this training on where you could see all these conditions. That's our goal. We didn't want to hold back on giving you the information, and that's why we've done this online course today. Um, and we haven't got any of these field courses quite ready yet. The None of the sites are cut yet, but it's coming. This is just a reference to the material that's coming out that both Victoria and I have been referring to. OWA has a practical guide coming out soon that they've been working on, so that's one to keep your eye on. There's some of our group. Meg and Dan from FSmith Consulting, Sam and Brett from Simcoe, and Will from Simcoe. Um, Everybody's smiling because this is good stuff, right? That's what the site looks like in Simcoe, the Haynes track. That's pretty well it for me, Kaylin. If you want to open it for questions, I'll
Yeah.
stop sharing my.
Okay. Definitely. Thanks, Ken. That was great.
You're welcome.
Um, do we have any questions coming in? I did link in the chat a survey for everyone to fill out if they're interested in the part two portion of the field training portion of this workshop. So fill that out if you're interested. Dan, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to provide maybe a comment. Ken and Victoria provided a great capture of hemlock woolly adelgid. We've just come through the invasive species forum this week. It was a real a compilation of all the great work that's going on with invasive species in the province and in Canada, in fact. And I think one of the risks that we should be conscious of is becoming desensitized to some of the invasive species that are on the landscape and focusing on that doom and gloom. I think it's important that we, the really good work that's going on with hemlock. And I remember sitting down with Bill Parker when he started to put together his hemlock guides, silviculture guides, trying to determine, what other pests impact hemlock stands in Ontario. And there's not a lot. There was a few hemlock outbreaks that are looper outbreaks that were captured in the past, some incidental budworm that have caused defoliation, but for the most part, it's relatively pest free. We talked about the uses of hemlock. We know that hemlock was a number one species when we built our barns and bridges across Ontario in the early settlement years, and those are important. So I think the good news takeaway message from the network that we're creating here is it's setting us up for the next outbreak or the next pest that's on our doorstep. We're learning where the sort of the weak links are. With hemlock, certainly it was inventory across the south. But I just wanted to make that comment. Great presentations, and just to not become desensitized to invasive species on the landscape, I think is important. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Always good to have your voice. It's yeah, I think as I think it's a really good comment. I think maybe a lot of us are excited about the opportunity with Hemlock, and that some management looks like it's could be helpful. And a lot of people have skills around managing forests. So if we can get some people in to do some thinning in these stands, I mean, I didn't really mention it, but I often get Ken, there's not a lot of markets for hemlock, and that's a limitation in some cases. It's hard to get people into to do work in these stands. But I mean, some of the smaller stands, the idea of thinning and maybe not using the wood if it's just a small stand is still okay. The trees will still respond, and that's something that some people are doing. So anyway, any other questions?
Any questions in the chat, Meg?
There's some questions coming in for Fraser and Victoria, but nothing yet for you, Ken. Great job, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. And yeah, if people have questions later on after Fraser presents, we'll open it up to like an open question period as well. We're gonna take another 5-minute break.